Charlie, you're a writer.
Yeah. So let me preface this with I'm a writer and I would love to be a member of the Writers Guild of America. And that is a big goal of mine. And I will try to stay as objective as possible for this discussion.
Yeah, and I'm not a writer or anything of the sort. I'm just a tech person. So I'll just be asking you about WGA writer. So what is the WGA?
So it's the Writers Guild of America. It's a large union in the film and TV business, and they provide pensions and healthcare for people who write for film and television and new media and stuff of that sort. And they've been around for a very long time. I was actually born with Writers Guild insurance. My dad is a Writers Guild member, so my birth was covered by the Writers Guild, and thank you very much.
Thank you to Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and all the things your dad worked on.
Exactly. That led to my birth. Thank you.
So why are they so angry?
Well, this happens every few years. They have to renegotiate their contracts, and it basically always happens when there's a big turning point in society or the industry or technology, and it's sort of a confluence of everything this time. There's been a huge saturation of content with all the streamers, so the deals are smaller. The writers' rooms are smaller. There's more work, but less money to go around in the studio's perspective. And the writers are working harder than ever, but also feeling underpaid in terms of, we have inflation, so everything seems more expensive and their salaries haven't been going up. And then the big elephant in the room is the AI advancements in the last 6 months, which have added a new wrinkle to everything in the future for the business.
I think I saw the when you count in inflation, I think they went down 23% on wages across the board, something like that.
Yeah, that would make sense. And you see that with non-writing jobs too. I mean, when I lived in LA and I was working as an assistant, assistants got something like $400 a week, and it was largely the same price that they were paying assistants from the 90s on. So it's one of these things where inflation does seem to overtake wages, especially in this industry.
And more in the weeds, what do you need to do to become part of WGA? Like, what's the requirements?
You have to have a qualifying sale, basically, for a company that's a signatory to the Writers Guild. So, for example, if I created a TV show and sold it to Netflix, that would, that sale would qualify me to be able to join the guild. And then to join the guild, it's many thousands of dollars to join, and then you pay yearly too to keep up your dues for health insurance and the pension. And every time you get paid for a project, part of your sale is put away to the pension fund and the health fund.
And you have to be voted in too, right? Like it's a 2/3 majority vote.
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I'm not successful enough I've never gotten that far. I only know you have to sell something, but that makes sense. I could see how that could be an issue, because one of the things that you'll see that's happening now is, along that same token, if I tried to sell something to Netflix right now during the strike and they bought it, I would be labeled the scab for crossing the line. And the Writers Guild has said that they won't let scabs into the guild after the fact. So I think that's why they have that safeguard, is they want to make sure that these are people acting in good faith and they're allies of the membership.
Oh, wow. So even though you're not part of WGA, if you were to do something writing wise
for a big studio or anyone
right,
who's a signatory, there are non-signatory, there are like small companies that do like animation, or I mean, not all animation is non-signatory, but they're little indie things that are made for non-union crews and stuff like that. So it's all the big studios and name brands that you've heard of are people that are guild signatories.
and the WGA is like 11,500 people, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And don't forget, that's everything from teenagers who have sold scripts all the way to, people who are retired, like my dad, who are very advanced in age.
And that reaches out to Canada too, right?
I believe it does, as long as you're working in in America, you probably are a member, but I think Canada might have their own unions as well, though, for their industry.
What are your thoughts on the overall demands for them not to use AI?
I think it's a super interesting conversation. I think they need nuance. I think both parties need to look at it in a little more nuanced way. I mean, AI is disrupting everything, not just this industry. So I think it's a lot of the same themes in terms of anytime there's a technological advancement, it's pretty hard to say you can't use a new technology. You know, you think about planes, you think about the postal service, you think about the internet, all these things that we could have said, no, you can't use the internet, you can't use email because then we can't, you know, the stamp people who sell stamps are going to get put out of business more. So I think it's the same kind of thing where it's going to be really hard to say you have to use humans for certain things other than us. But I mean, I think right now it's not as big of an issue because the writing just doesn't seem to be that good yet. But you know, as we see, everything is going to get better with this stuff. But I think that they need to. I think everyone just needs to start figuring out what do humans do that only humans can do, and how can technology make that quicker and more efficient and have us create more things. I mean, I think, you know, the WGA members are definitely free to use the same technology as well to create scripts faster and come up with ideas, and it might be a good tool for them. I also think in the same way we saw what Napster did to the music industry and what YouTube did to creators of content. You know, I can shoot a Netflix approved piece of content on a Lumix camera that's like $4,000. I mean, that never was something that we thought could happen before. So in the same, you know, the studios, if I were them, I'd be just as scared as the writers are right now about being replaced, because I think you and I in 15 years might be able to make a Marvel movie between our two computers in the same way that the studio has all that stuff. So so their infrastructure, just look at, you know, they used to be the ones that distributed movies to all the places in the US, all the theaters, and now it's just all online and on the cloud. And all of that stuff is their sort of value proposition and what they bring is getting harder and harder. So I think that they both need to realize that it's going to change quickly. And I think they both have equally existential threats posed to them.
In any negotiations, you got to go way over what you want. I feel like they may have even just asked about the AI just to throw it out.
Yeah, and I think it's smart because it's, you know, it's like any deal like that. You want to do the full stop version and then negotiate. And the guild said something about we'll have, or not the guild, the studio said that they would have every year, they'd have a technology meeting with them or whatever. I think,
oh wow,
if I had to guess, the writers would probably be happy with them saying, sort of like the 6-month Elon Musk pause, saying something like, we'll agree to pause you know, using this stuff for 6 months to a year if you get back to work, kind of thing. And then, and you know, and we'll have discussions in that time to see if we can, you know, so there might be some sort of clause there. I mean, one of the problems is these contracts go for multiple years, so that's why it's,
I think it was 3 years, right?
yeah, so that's why it's at an impasse right now, because 3 years in AI time is like the end of civilization.
You show up to the next meeting on like your hover car and AI assistant dog next to you.
Contract negotiations are on Mars, and they're conducted solely with toasters and ovens and other internet connected appliances that have replaced us.
It'll be funny if it moved past AI somehow and this didn't even apply. So it wasn't even called AI. It's like, oh no, there's like superhuman plants that just give you answers to things.
Yeah,
like,
it's exactly. They're always saying that AI is going to destroy the world. It's the big revelation that AI has, is that it's going to destroy the world. So it destroys everyone and every piece of technology. So 3 years from now, it's just a barren planet with just animals and no more connectivity.
they're like, yeah, you can't use sticks now, I guess.
So one of the things that I think is interesting is their demand, the writers' demand about having larger writers' rooms. And I think that there's a lot of backlash on some of that stuff. It feels arbitrary, but I think one of the interesting things to note about that whole process of how writers room function that people might not always realize is there's so much collaboration, especially in these television writers rooms, where there's a lot of younger writers are getting mentored by the showrunners and more senior writer producers, and they're learning a lot about how to make a television show, how to create a show. They're on set with them, they're working with the actors, rewriting stuff on set while they're shooting. They're helping to watch the dailies, which is what they call the, everything that's been shot the day before. And they're learning how the editing process works. So it's sort of like a second film school for them, where they figure out how to make this stuff and progress in their careers. So one of the problems with these mini rooms that they're naming them mini rooms is that they're not really a part of this process at all. And because of that, they're not able to learn and advance in the business as easily with that kind of knowledge. So that's one interesting thing about it. And then also the collaboration, even though like a TV script is written by one or two people in the credits, it's usually everyone on staff that has had a piece of it. On some shows that there'll be people that just write for one character. If it's a sitcom, like they're really good at writing jokes for maybe one of the characters. So they do all of that. They're all together around the table, breaking the story, making the outline and of what's going to happen before that one person writes that first draft that they all edit together. So I think that collaborative process is what they're trying to hold on to.
Is requiring a minimum good? Because I could see how what you're talking about, your room gets bigger and bigger, and that's a good thing. But for a low budget show, is that good to have a minimum?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question because, it's like anything in economics. If you add supply, demand might shrink and vice versa. So if you have these larger rooms, there might actually be less shows that get greenlit by these companies because they may have less money to put at other content. So I think again, it's something that probably needs a little more nuance when they negotiate it, where maybe when it's beginning, it's a slightly smaller staff, hopefully a little bigger than some of these really skeleton crews that they're talking about in the news. But, maybe if it gets to season 2, they expand the writer's room to a certain threshold. I think it's fair to say if something's in an infant stage, you're not sure how it's going to do. But if it becomes successful, it's going to make more money and have more revenue streams. And then I think it's only fair to start looking at incentivizing it and saying you can, get more writers for your season 2, 3, 4, or whatever. So I think that's something that might be a negotiation point that could be interesting.
And that's something that corresponds to AI too, because if you have, I don't know, 2 writers with like 1 or 2 prompt engineers, like you probably have the processing power of, I don't know, 10 writers or something like that. I don't know what the figure would be, but yeah, your efficiency is going to start going up as you start incorporating AI.
Yeah, as long as you know how to use it. I mean, I think that's the thing, is that some people are just going to be really intuitively good at it. Whereas it's going to be pretty rare, I think, where there's going to be people who are great prompt engineers and really good at all the creative stuff that we know of today. So the writers' rooms might look a lot different. There might be people such as yourself who are just super, technologically savvy, who are sitting in the rooms with these people and collaborating in that way. So that could be a cool part of it.
Yeah, I think that's where prompt engineering is going to go, where you're a prompt engineer plus these other things. So like you could be a photographer and a good prompt engineer, and that puts you in a good place for like photography, or like a good writer plus a good prompt engineer, and that just like opens up all these other venues for you.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense, and I could see that being the way. So one of the things that does bother me a lot, though, about the backlash to the writers in this situation, probably what the most egregious thing I've seen that's criticism, is when people point to a Rotten Tomatoes score being low and then saying that the writers aren't making good stuff anyways, and so it's stupid that they're striking. But that is the Rotten Tomatoes score is a byproduct of the entire movie. If you look at the credits of a movie, they're the writer or team of writers, but there are hundreds of people that could have messed that movie up, from the studio level all the way down to the makeup person, to the sound person, to the costume person. not that those people aren't excellent at what they do, 99% of them are, but I think boiling that one score down to the fault of a script is just complete garbage.
And we're also talking about 11.5 thousand writers. So that one movie you hate isn't necessarily representative of all other writers in Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. Not every knee surgeon is going to fix your knee correctly. It's like if you go to a restaurant and your piece of fish is cold and the person at the restaurant eating it is like, the person who made the recipe for this fish is just terrible at what they do. Like there are a million things that could have happened throughout the process on the line cooks and the server and all the places that it went before it got to their table.
Dude, I see that on Amazon with like product reviews. You'll read a comment and they'll give it 1 star and it's like, oh, it came damaged or it came late. Like that's the shipping person, not the product.
The UPS driver got divorced that day. They were having a terrible day and they damaged everything. So one of the things too that's frustrating is just the way that the business works. It is a gig economy business, like they said it's going towards, because you get hired project by project. So you can be on a TV show that gets canceled, and then you have to figure out a way to have your agent or manager or someone or yourself to try to get on another show or get someone to buy your movie. So it's not like a salary where you could make a bunch of money one year and then make zero the next year. So it's very stressful. So that's why the guild is important. And that's why unions in general can be so important for certain industries, because they provide you that stability, that retirement pension later in age, that guaranteed health insurance that isn't tied to full-time employment in that same way. So when people look at how much these people are making, it's not predictive. It's unlike generative AI. You can't predict the next thing.
Nice. And I was also looking at like some of the breakdowns, which were confusing, but I definitely took away that the salary or number or whatever you see is distributed to like lawyers, agents, other writers they might hire under them get paid like from their salary. So there's a lot of distribution of that money before the person actually pockets that money.
Yeah, for sure. You're giving 10% to your agent, 15% to a manager if you have them, 10% to a lawyer if you have one of those, 50% to your ex-wife, 10% to your dog who eats only the bbest kibble.
Purina.
And also, and I'm not even sure if they're taking out the federal taxes or if they're just 1099. So then you have to pay you have to pay your taxes on it too. And so it's a big chunk.
Right. Yeah, it's before taxes. So
yeah, I mean, another thing too about the minimums for streaming is I feel like there's just a much different business model now than it used to be for how you got paid for people rewatching things. So I think they do need to figure out a new way to recognize the writer's fees for things that are on Netflix for a certain amount of time or get put on another streaming service, and how that all works, because there's definitely less money than it used to be. And it's way easier to track. They can actually just demand the stream numbers and see exactly how much something is getting watched and figure out a way to monetize that residual payment. So I think that's super important, because that has changed a ton since recent history.
Are the streaming studios, if you will, open with creators on the numbers? Because I know like sometimes they can just not show numbers.
Yeah, I feel like it's always a little murky. There's always people who say that they're transparent, but then people that say they're not being transparent about, there's terms such as like net proceeds on movies, but the way they calculate the net of things can be very opaque